Hello chickens, I'm out in a park and decided to stop and look at my notes and see if there's something that I can make while I'm out here enjoying the fresh air, because I've been trapped inside for hours on end. Trapped is a bit dramatic. I put myself there in that situation in order to work on something that I am beavering away on. So I felt like time for a walk, time for a change of scenery, and I'm going to film my video out here instead of filming it under a roof, and it feels lovely. I feel very refreshed. I'm in a park in London, and what could be a greater privilege than that on a lovely day such as today, where it looks like it's going to threaten rain later, but not quite at the moment. So I should be all good to get through this important subject. So a while ago I made a video about estrangement from the family. I made a video about my journey of getting more comfortable with the idea of not speaking to an entire half of my family. I talked about some of the things I've recognized along the way, about boundary setting, about cutting family ties and that kind of thing, and that video went really well. A lot of people said it helped them out. There are people that watch my videos who are well underway with having cut ties with either a specific family member or a whole section of their family. And there are members of my audience who are thinking about doing that, or who feel like it might be in their future, but it is actually really scary for them right now to consider that. So they are right at the beginning of a potential journey of cutting ties with a family member or with a section of their family, or whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of different experiences that go on amidst the people that watch my channel, and if I can do anything to be of service to anyone who is either already estranged from family or who is thinking that they might need to be, then that's what I would very much like to do. I know my own experience was a mixture of ups and downs, very, very hard in places, and I've come to a point now where I feel comfortable to advise others and to give what little advice I have. I know it's a really big subject, and obviously every person's individual experience is so different. Sorry darlings, you're probably going to go through quite a few position changes with the camera because I'm trying to find something that works. You're just propped up against my bag at the moment, so I'm just trying to find something that makes sense. Welcome to my chin, guys. This is a very chin heavy position here. So yeah, basically if there's anything that I can do with what little experience I have from my personal story that can help anybody who is struggling with estrangement or thinking that they may need to at some point become less connected with their family, then I'd like to be able to do that. And I think the first video took you through a lot of my different perceptions and a few nuggets of wisdom I thought would be good to give, but I want to give a lot more in this one. I want to talk more about what you can be doing after you disconnect from a family member or a section of family. What can you do to make it easier for you? What are the pitfalls you might need to look out for along the way? And I want to talk from my own direct experiences in a way that I hope will guide you wherever you are on your journey. Obviously some things are going to be relevant, some things are not. As always with my videos, take what resonates and leave the rest, obviously. Just to say before I begin dispensing any advice, I am making this video to kind of complement and go alongside the other video that I made. So if you haven't watched that and this is a subject that interests you, do go and watch that first. I'll leave it for you in the description bar below. So the first thing I want to get to is talking about occasions, talking about times on the yearly calendar where the feeling of being disconnected from your family might be an issue for you. If you have come to a point in your life where you are disconnecting or you are on the verge of disconnecting, then you will probably already have thought of this. You know, it's probably going to be something that's come up as you've been trying to figure out which way to go, you know, how to make your decision. A lot of people that feel for a long time that they need to pull away from a toxic or destructive family dynamic will refrain from doing so precisely because of family occasions, the idea of spending those occasions without the people that we've always spent them with. So we're talking about things like Father's Day, Mother's Day, birthdays, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter. We're thinking about those things that repeat yearly, and those things, those events, those times have certain rituals associated with them. We have certain expectations of those particular events and occasions. We have things that we do. We have traditions that have been put in place for years because we are part of a family unit, and that's how it's always been for us for years. So the idea of being without those rituals, the idea of having to disconnect, even the mere thought of, you know, not calling your father on Father's Day, not going home for Thanksgiving and seeing the family and the extended family, just even the thought of those things is freaky deaky for a lot of people. And they may put up with really toxic, damaging, dangerous family dynamics for years because the idea of the occasions is so big, the gravity of it is so scary and so sad that people just feel, well, I don't like the idea that I won't be doing anything on Thanksgiving potentially, or that I'm not going to have that phone call with mum on Mother's Day, or even that, you know, my parent or my sibling is not going to be with me on my birthday. You know, we think about what Christmas is going to be like. Is it going to be awkward for other members of the family if we say that we don't want to talk to such and such a member of the family? Is it going to be, you know, you being marginalised or being cast out? For some people, the decision that they need to make is going to just mean some awkwardness at family occasions. It's not necessarily going to mean that anybody has to cease attending a family occasion, but it could mean, for instance, like if you stop talking to a sibling and you decide, you know what, my relationship with you has got to be put on ice, or it's got to be over because it's unhealthy. Then you might both decide that you're still going to attend Thanksgiving, or you're still going to attend a family wedding, and you're going to be civil with each other. You're just going to do the niceties, keep it civil and keep it moving. For other people though, with other kinds of decisions to make, there is really the gravity of recognising that a person may never be round the Thanksgiving table again. A person may never again attend a family wedding, christening, funeral, because it's really about cutting off that many members of the family, or it's really that much of a toxic situation that they have to decide to completely sever. And of course that is bloody hard. You know, any of these decisions are really bloody hard. All of them take a great sense of empowerment, a great deal of centering, and a knowledge of what it is that you will and will not put up with. And, you know, for many, it takes a long time to reach these decisions. So when you do reach a decision that you are going to sever from your family in a way which may prevent you from attending certain occasions, you do need to recognise that when those occasions unfold over the course of the year, it's going to be difficult for you to do things like look on social media or have conversations with your friends and people in your life, work colleagues, etc., about what they're going to be doing. So there needs to be quite a lot of mental and emotional preparation and a lot of self-care when those occasions are upcoming and when they are occurring. So for instance, Mother's Day and Father's Day, for people who have living mothers and fathers and don't speak to them, are estranged from them. Now, of course, there's a lot of pain for people on Mother's and Father's Day whose parents are deceased, and I would never take that away from anybody, but because this video is about estrangement, it's about severing from living family, that's what we're talking about here in this context. Now, obviously, with Mother's Day, Father's Day, there's a lot of stuff that is talked about on social media. There are lots of people that are talking about their plans, what they're going to do for mum or dad, or where they're going to go. You have to kind of steel yourself and be prepared for those kinds of conversations to unfold. You may feel the need to limit yourself from those conversations and to limit yourself from exposure to the occasion itself. And that can mean taking a little break from social media over, you know, the course of the day or so, where Mother's Day or Father's Day, for example, is unfolding. I'm giving you this advice not because I intend for you to try and ignore your pain, to ignore the occasion that's taking place, to pretend it doesn't mean anything to you, but I'm really saying that sometimes a break from social media on the day before and the day of, for example, can be good, because it helps you to have a space where you can start to figure out how you're going to see the day differently and what you're going to do instead. Obviously, like I said, there are a lot of traditions and a lot of associations and clusters of vibes and feelings that build up around days like that recur every year. And it's not just Mother's and Father's Day, it can be Christmas, it can be Thanksgiving. It's traditional times where family come together, traditional times where there's holiday and family sit together and break bread. And I think that we can, as people who have chosen to sever our connections to family, create new traditions for ourselves and make those days meaningful in different kinds of ways. We can find joy in those kinds of days. We can switch up the meaning of those days and give ourselves an opportunity to honour ourselves for what we've done in severing from unhealthy family connections when those occasions come up. But I think we do need to give ourselves a healthy sense of space away from discussion about those occasions and away from, you know, posts about those occasions. I know that for me, my Instagram feed is fully chock-a-block during Mother's Day or Father's Day with, no doubt, like, yeah, wonderful posts about people's lovely connections with their mums and dads and how much they value their mums and dads and how much of a good time they're having reconnecting with their mums and dads on these really lovely days. And for me, for a while, obviously on my journey, it was difficult. I didn't want to be exposed to all of that. I'm okay with it now, but it was a journey, and it's going to be a journey for you as well. And I don't want you to feel ashamed of yourself or feel guilty if you're not there yet, and if you don't feel like you can sit there and scroll through endless Instagram posts about how wonderful it is to have such a glorious mum or a wonderful dad. And you know, your journey is going to roll out at its own pace. You will develop your own sense of significance around the day, and the pain that is associated with the day, whatever that day is, whether it's Christmas, whether it's Thanksgiving, whether it's New Year, whether it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, the pain will start to dull and will start to lessen as you go on your own journey of exploration, and as you start to recognize the positive benefits of disconnecting from your family or from certain members of your family. But at first, it is difficult, and even when the pain starts to lessen, there can still be triggers. Sometimes somebody can just say a certain thing in a certain way that reminds you of something to do with your family. They might describe what their Thanksgiving was like, and it might remind you of the times you used to sit round the Thanksgiving dinner table and be with your family, and how that's not the case anymore. Or somebody might just describe something particular that their father does for them, that they're honouring their father for on Father's Day, and it could be like the very thing that your father never fucking did for you. And it could just get you, you know, even years after you've made your peace with the fact that certain family members aren't going to be in your life, you can have those moments where it's like, oh, that got me, that really poked me, that hurt my shadow. And that's okay, you know, that is okay. I think the next piece of advice I would give is not to make it anybody else's problem. And there is definitely two sides to this. There's definitely two sides to this really important coin. First of all, I make it my duty never to expose people to any vitriol or sadness or insecurity that I have about what I haven't managed to achieve with my father or with any of that side of the family. It's nobody else's fault if they have a great relationship with their dad. And yes, sometimes in the past it may have poked me, sometimes it might be difficult for me, but it is not their fault. They are not purposefully telling the wonderful story of their connection with their father in order to hurt me and tear me down and make me feel inadequate for not having that same experience, right? So I had to be very careful when I was going through the more difficult and I think anger-fueled, anger-soaked parts of my journey of disconnection, that I didn't make it somebody else's fault, and I didn't give somebody else attitude for kind of celebrating their wonderful connection with their family, whatever member of their family. So yes, that's important. It's important that we don't expose other people to our passive aggression or our snarky comments because they're trying to celebrate their connection with their family, their great Thanksgiving or Christmas or Father's Day, whatever it is. We need to make sure that we're not making those people suffer for what it is that we didn't get to experience, or the pain that we're going through as we process the estrangement from our family members. It's not their fault. It's good to be happy for people for the things that they do have that we haven't had in life, you know? And I think there are many other ways that you can identify in which you are capable of doing that. So don't tell yourself you're not capable of being happy for people who find themselves in a great parental situation or a great familial situation that you yourself don't have. You absolutely can be happy for others. At the same time as recognizing, oh, you know, that's poking me. It's hard to listen to my friend's wonderful story about her great relationship with her sister when me and my sister don't talk, or whatever the case may be. Now, at the same time, the other side of that coin that's really important is that you can expect the people who are in your life, who are close to you, to appreciate where you are coming from and to understand your pain as well. If you feel that somebody is being incredibly insensitive when it comes to your own experience of disconnection from family, then you have a right to say so. You have a right to say, hey, you know, I'd love it if you check in with me as well. I'm not in a similar situation to you. I don't speak to my parent on Parents' Day, or I don't go home for Thanksgiving, or when I do go home, it's hard for me because of these things. And I feel like, you know, I have a very different story to you, and it's important to me that I feel that you understand that and you appreciate that. Now, obviously, you might not feel okay saying that to your boss or somebody who isn't super close to you. They may say something that bothers you about a family occasion of some kind, and you might just have to suck it up. But when it comes to things like your closest friends, your partner, that kind of thing, it's important that they understand that it's difficult for you, that it's sticky for you, that you're not just another person who can say, oh yeah, I had a great Thanksgiving, or oh yeah, I need to call my dad, it's Father's Day. You know, whatever your situation is, you have the right to have people close to you in your life who are appreciative of that and sensitive towards that. You don't want to have people close to you in your life who are constantly saying silly things like, well, why don't you just, you know, ring them up? Or why don't you just reconcile? It would make it easier for you. That's not sensitive, and that's not somebody that's trying to see where you're coming from. And you certainly don't want someone who's going to gleefully talk on and on and on and on about, you know, their lovely experience of Thanksgiving or their great Father's Day or whatever, without checking in with you and saying, oh honey, I know it's difficult for you, how are you feeling, how are things with you? Not hard, you know? So it's two sides to that coin. You want to make sure you're not giving somebody else shit for having something that you don't have, but at the same time they need to be sensitive to the fact that they have something that you don't have. So it's give and take. I think that's the best way of dealing with it personally. Going back to what I said about limiting your social media usage and preparing yourself before you have conversations about things like, you know, events that usually you'd see family on or whatever, I definitely think it's worth saying that you can go into a conversation about something like this, or you can go on social media if you have previously empowered yourself and steeled yourself for what is to come. There are many, many ways in which you can practice self-care around these kinds of occasions if you know that they are bothersome to you, that they do hurt you, that you do tend to feel sad about what you don't have with your family during times where people are being overly positive in public about what they do have with theirs. You know what I mean? So you don't always have to pull yourself entirely away from every conversation or every post, but you do need to make sure that you take some time with yourself in the mornings before entering into any dialogue, online or offline, and use that time to breathe deeply and center yourself and say, I know why I have to be disconnected from family, and it's for me, and it's positive for me. I'm feeling the benefits of my decision. Try and speak to yourself a little bit about the personal benefit and the value that you get from not being connected with members of your family, even if it wasn't your decision, even if it was them that cut you off, even if it was them that gave you shit and made you feel unwanted. You must be able to see at a certain point why it's important that you are not connected to them just as they don't want to be connected to you. It's obviously not healthy. And so it's more about centering into that, I think, before you expose yourself to any discussions around those occasions or any social media posts related to those occasions. Remember, if you're not invited to Thanksgiving, if you can't go to the Christmas gathering because there's a family member there that you don't speak to, whatever it might be, you can have your own traditions. You can make your own thing happen. You can decide on something special to do for you, something that's meaningful and significant for you, something that you will look back on the following year and say, you know what, that had value. It was painful for me that I don't have the kind of family experience that others have, or I didn't get to speak to so-and-so because it's not like that between us, but I really decided to do something else healthy and good for me. I gave myself a joyful experience regardless. Don't forget that you can open up to other people who empathise. You'll probably find a lot of people down in the comments section beneath this video who empathise with your situation, who find themselves in a similar situation. Like I said at the beginning, some people that watch my channel are fully estranged from an entire section of their family. Some people haven't spoken to a living parent for over 10 years. Some people are right at the beginning. They're thinking that maybe it might be of use to them to at least temporarily pause a family connection. So wherever you are, you're going to find people in the comments that get it. If you feel brave enough to write about your concerns or describe your story, please do so in the comments section, and you may find that there are other people who really connect with you on that. Even if you don't get any comments, you're likely to find at least one or two people like your comment, as if to say, yeah, you know what, the same thing with me. Sometimes it can feel so comforting and so empowering, it's strengthening to be able to just even very, very slightly, even briefly, connect with someone who has a similar situation, someone who's dealing with something that is similar to you. It makes you feel less alone. Sometimes we can feel very alone in having to have separated from family members. As I mentioned in the previous video that I made, which again, I'll link in the description bar, there are still a lot of very toxic narratives and a lot of very toxic messages in the media, etc., around us in culture all the time that claim that family is the most prevalent thing and that you should really do everything within your power to maintain a family connection. Family is king, basically, and that can be really lonely for someone who knows that they made the right decision to sever. So when you speak to other people who also severed and are also on a journey with that, it really makes you feel like you're coming together with other people that have made that decision for themselves, even though they didn't necessarily feel that they had society on their side a lot of the time. Obviously, occasions such as Thanksgiving, such as Mother's and Father's Day, that kind of thing, those occasions can be tough times when you are disconnected from family, when you've taken that distance. But obviously sometimes just on the average day, it could just be an ordinary wet Wednesday afternoon, you could feel really slapped in the face by the pain of recognizing that you don't have that family connection anymore. And I think during those times, it's really important to truly fully connect as much as you can with how valuable it's been for you, how truly valuable it's been for you to have that distance, what it's given you, basically. And if you can, I would really recommend writing it down or recording your voice as you talk about the benefits. That can definitely help so much, just having something there that you can refer back to over and over again that reminds you of at least some of the reasons why severing has been important, why it's important for you to be disconnected from those family dynamics that have been really toxic and unhealthy for you. Sometimes as well, we can feel a sense of weakness in our core when it comes to the decision not to interact with a family member, and we may feel like reconciling even though we know that psycho-spiritually it's not a good thing for us. So at times like that, it is useful to be able to refer to some kind of document. I know it sounds really corporate and really kind of like cold, but referring to some kind of document is a very useful one when you feel like you're wobbling and you're wavering in your choice. Now, I'm not saying that a person who severs from family has to remain severed from family indefinitely and that you should never change your mind or you should never try to reconcile. Like I said, everybody's journey is different, and there are some people who do reconcile after many years, and it's healthy for them and it's the right thing for them. But if you know that you are just weakening because you feel lonely, or because you feel that if you reconciled, for example, with a sibling, then your parent would love you more, if you feel pressure to reconcile from other family members but you know that it's not right, it's useful to have that document there that you open up, that you refer to, that you listen back to, that reminds you of why you made this kind of decision, or reminds you of why you're better off without connecting with that family member. Remember that nobody else gets to tell you what is the right thing to do in your case. If you want to reconcile, if it's time to reconcile, if you feel that in your fucking water, then that's what you have to do. That's what you've got to make an attempt for. But there are lots of instances where I think people know that it's not right for them, but they feel that pressure. And it goes back somewhat to what I just said in this video about the societal pressure, the societal expectation, the sense that people around you have got their lovely family situation and you want to kind of replicate something similar for yourself. I think when we feel that kind of pressure, we need to really be able to check in with the reasons why that's not a good idea. And again, this is where it can help to also empathize with others and have conversations with others who find themselves in a similar sort of situation, because it can really steel you and it can make you feel like, yeah, you know what, I'm not alone. There are a lot of people who have had to do this for their own sanity, for their self-preservation, and I'm just one of those people who's had to do this as well. And you feel that sense that you're not so alone with it. I'm holding the stick now, so hopefully it won't be too wobbly. Another thing I really want to get across in this video to you guys is that you do not have to accept triangulation or interference. If you find that there is a family member who is giving you hell, who is pressuring you, who is trying to get you to fucking talk to a family member that you know it's unhealthy to talk to, or to become embroiled again in family drama that you know is bad for you, you do not have to accept that. And it is your duty to protect yourself from that if it is an ongoing thing. Now, with triangulation, you're going to find that that is something that occurs where a family member that you do still talk to is in cahoots with a family member that you don't talk to, and perhaps they are trying to get you into something or pull you into something. Sometimes it can be very well-meaning. It can be a family member who just wants everybody to get along and just wants everything to be back to normal or back to the old days, and they may therefore be very even manipulative or very underhanded in the way that they communicate with you and in the ways in which they try to bring you back into the fold. You have absolutely every right to be assertive against that. You have absolutely every right to set a boundary against that. And it is the kind of thing that can seem harmless at first, but over the course of time, it can grate on you. It can make you feel as though you've got to reconcile, even though you know that it would be very unhealthy to do so. So sometimes you do need to really recognize when triangulation or interference is occurring and nip it in the bud. You don't need to be really rude, you know, if it's a family member that you really care about and you really love, but you feel that they are putting pressure on you, or they keep bringing up the conversation and they won't seem to let it lie, tell them that you want them to let it fucking lie. You know, tell them that that's got to be a hard limit for you if you want your enriching connection with them to continue. People need to learn to respect your conversational boundaries. And sometimes it might take a couple of fucking goes before you really get somebody to understand, like, it's a hard line, seriously, drop it. And after that, you know, if your boundary is still not being respected, then yeah, you do need to consider some kind of a break from them, because that's the kind of carousel you can't carry on with forever. It's frustrating. At some point you have to get off. I'm going to refer to my notes for this next piece of advice because I wrote the sentence that I really feel is perfect to describe what I'm trying to put across. I wrote, if family is an energy, an action, a feeling, or an ideal, what is it to you and how can you live it? That's one of the pieces of advice that I feel could be the most valuable. That kind of thinking has really helped me, guys. You know, kind of moving away from this idea of family as being a collection of people that are tied together by a few percent of DNA, and instead thinking about the ideological version of family, the philosophical ideas about family, the feeling that family gives you, the vibration that the word family holds. What do I associate family with? When I say the word, what do I think it means? How would I live family? How would I show the energy of family in my behaviour with others? Those are the questions that are important to me. Those are the questions that I'm seeking to answer in my behaviour around others and my connections with others. And I think that's one of the major ways in which being estranged from a big chunk of my family has really helped me to thrive and flourish and do the work that I do in the world. So I really wanted to put that across to you. Maybe it's time for you to think about what family means as an ideal, as an action, as a feeling, as an energy, as an intention, as a behaviour, as a vibration in the world with others and with yourself. Finally, my darlings, please know that one day you may help somebody just as I'm striving to help you now. If you're in a really difficult place, if everything is a clusterfuck right now, if you really don't know if you're going to sever, if you're not going to sever, if you have severed and you found that it's been really painful and you're going through pain at the moment, please know that it's not going to be like that forever. The intensity of the pain is not going to be that strong forever. You do come to a point where you really have collected your strength. You understand why things had to happen the way that they did. You are solid in your choice. You are behind your own choice. And then comes the point where you can potentially help someone else who's on that rocky bit of the road. Being able to offer this kind of advice to people who find themselves having to disconnect from family, fearing that they may disconnect from family, it means a lot to me. It's really a major point on my journey. It's a point of growth. I've recognised that I've moved on to that sort of phase in my evolution as somebody who's estranged from family, where I can really start to put together some of the building blocks of what I've learned along the way, the things that have helped me, and then pay that forward. And if you feel like you're a million miles away from being there, please let me just reassure you that one day it's very, very, very possible that you will be there, honey bunny. It's not going to last forever. Hey honeybees, a little bit of a change of scenery here. This is late night editing me, coming up with a few other things that I really wanted to make sure that I do get into this video. I don't want to leave these things out. I think they also could be helpful for people, so I'm going to continue on from where I left off earlier when I had my little jaunt in the park. So I think that this piece of advice is something that I actually did put across in the first video, and I want to just like sort of reinstate it here basically because it was so helpful for me. I'm not in any way saying that everybody needs to do this who's severed from their family. I'm not saying in any way that it's a bygone conclusion that this is what you've got to do. But for me, it was helpful, and that was the name change. I did change my name by Depol. My name, Maddox, is not my family name. I chose that name because I like the way it looks, I like the way it sounds, I like the vibe of it, I like the meaning of it. Well, I partially like the meaning of it. It's complicated, but it just seemed to be representative of me. It gave me a sort of feeling and a vibe, if you will, that seemed like, yeah, that I seem like a Maddox. So I chose Maddox. And that was very powerful for me. It was very meaningful for me not to have to carry around this surname that had nothing to do with the life I was living, nothing to do with where I was spending my Christmases and my New Year's, nothing to do with anything that was relevant to my life anymore. I think that there's a lot of power in names and labels and words. And I think that if you're carrying around a name that just doesn't reflect your reality anymore, and it is very much connected to a whole cluster of associations and a whole crop of people that you don't dialogue with anymore, then what's that about when you can just change it I was going to say so cheaply and so easily. It's not actually that easy. There were a number of fucking annoying bureaucratic fuck ups that I had to endure and deal with in order to get the name change actually how it was supposed to be and get it perfect. But that was the result of human error, and I persevered. And in the end, when I got my new passport with my new name come through the door, it felt fucking magical. It felt amazing. And I got to take my new documentation into work and be like, this is my new name now. And it felt incredible for me. It felt like a really spiritual experience. I wanted to mention that because it was valuable to me. Now, some people are going to have thought about a name change, either their first name, their surname, or the entirety of their name. I made a couple of other changes to my name as well. I have middle names now that I wasn't born with, etc. So some people are going to consider something like that, feel excited about it, feel like, yeah, that's something I want to do, and then decide against it. And that is a lot of the time because on some level they feel like they still have a strong enough connection to the name that they have, and it doesn't need to be a name change. That's not necessarily going to be part of their healing journey. But if you're somebody who's holding yourself back from getting a potential name change because you're telling yourself on some level that you're not allowed to, that you have to get some sort of external permission that's never going to come to you because nobody can give you that kind of permission, may I just suggest that you really think seriously about owning your desire to do that and at least looking into it, because it really was such a powerful part of my own journey of true psycho-spiritual emancipation from family, from the family ties. It's really genuinely not necessarily the right thing for everybody. Like I said, a lot of people do look into it and then they decide, no, that's not something that I need. It's not something that I'm going to be pursuing. But I do worry that there are a lot of people who have that in their back pocket as some kind of thing that they want to do at some point in the far distant future, when they feel like they can, when they feel like they're allowed to. And it's almost a scary thing. It's like you're going to get into some kind of fucking trouble with your family if you change your name. And to me, even though I've just said that words and labels and, names, they have power to them, they do have power to them. They are of importance. But at the end of the day, no one's going to fucking die horribly if you change your name. Okay, if you're still connected to some parts of your family, but you're not connected to other parts, okay, there may be certain people in your family who will feel upset or will take some time to process the fact that you want to change your name. But no one's going to die, all right? No one's going to be horribly injured. You're not booting anybody or over a cliff because you're changing your name. People will get used to it. And if it offers you a sense of empowerment, and if it offers you a symbolic and ritualistic way to confirm what it is that you're doing and why, and to lean into your new life in a positive way, then why not at least put it up on the table for consideration, I think. I wanted to talk a little bit about re-exploring your identity and really kind of reconnecting with your sense of who you are beyond whatever your family told you that you were. There are a lot of people that have what they would describe as quite healthy family dynamics who would definitely say, even though they have a healthy family life, that they feel pigeonholed by their family. They feel like they play a certain role within their family life, and they feel that they're being pushed into that role, or they're being consistently seen as only being connected to that role. So somebody might feel that for years and years they've been portrayed as the kind of mischievous trickster or the troublemaker in the family because of the way they behaved as a teenager. Maybe they broke the law as a teenager. Maybe they kind of stepped outside the lines. And as they've grown into an adult, they're still being painted with that brush. Maybe somebody in the family feels like they're always seen as the golden child, the goody two-shoes, the one that can be relied upon, the one that does no wrong. And maybe that's very restrictive for them, and they feel constantly pressured to be perfect by the family. These kinds of things happen all the time when the dynamic still feels reasonably healthy. So imagine how fucking stressful and how intense it can be when the dynamic is toxic and painful, and you're being pigeonholed, you're being stereotyped, you're being told who you are as a human being. A lot of the time, those are the kinds of things that eventually make you walk away from family members or from an entire side of the family, or stop talking to a sibling or a parent, whatever, because having to fulfill that role and endure that stereotyping and be told time and time again who you are and who you're not and what you're allowed to be and what you will never be, it's too much. And when people start to really dedicate themselves to their own journey of self-love and self-development, when they start to do that inner work, something inside them comes up ferocious like a lion and roars, fuck you. No, you don't get to tell me who the fuck to be. You don't get to tell me what I am and what I can never be. I'm going to start calling the shots. And that's a lot of the time how the distance begins to be taken. So I would definitely recommend that if you are somebody who is walking away from family, if you have ended relationships, if certain relationships are on ice, this is the perfect time to start to really re-explore your identity. What were the parts of your identity that were squashed under by the family dynamic and the family narrative? What parts of you were you not really allowed to embrace within yourself? What parts of you do you feel have been sorely underrepresented or under-nurtured? And how do you now want to go about owning those parts of you and celebrating those parts of you that didn't really get to see the light of day because of the labels that were put on you in your family? It could also be about re-exploring who other members of your family are, who they ever were. You know, I think sometimes we focus overly on how a bunch of assumptions have been made about us, and we feel like we're not really being seen and we're not really being allowed to own our fullness. And we recognize that because it troubles us. It's uncomfortable for us. But it's definitely worth also thinking about the other side of things where we have fed into a family dynamic that has potentially been destructive for other people. So for instance, you might begin to recognize that the parent that you've decided to step away from maybe always tried to pit you and your siblings against each other. Maybe they had certain preconceptions of their sibling that they fed to you, and maybe they told your sibling certain things about how you are. And so it started this horrible web of mistrust and judgment. And so it's also important to think about how you have contributed to those family dynamics as well. It's not just only about re-exploring who you are in your fullness and letting yourself be in your fullness. It's also about thinking, how have I gone along with family dynamics which have stopped others from being in their fullness? And how can I now start to maybe do that healing with those other family members to make sure that I'm really understanding who they are and where they're coming from? When you really start to know that you are allowed to step away from family, you know, that big scary thing that so many people convince themselves their whole life long that they are not allowed to do, like it's out of the question, stepping away from family, absolutely no way, family is sacred. When you recognize for yourself, I can walk away, no one is fucking stopping me, if this is what I need to do, then so be it. You really start to get to explore those things that have been taking you away from seeing the fullness of what was in front of you in the terrain. And sometimes it does ironically bring other family members much closer together when a relationship is stopped between yourself and a family member that's causing issues. You might have certain beliefs about what you're capable of doing, who you're capable of being in the world, that really were fed to you by a family member or by the family dynamic in general. And it's really a good time for you to acknowledge that those messages went in and that conditioning was thrust upon you, and it did change the course of your life in some ways. It did make you feel like you couldn't do certain things, you weren't allowed access to certain things. And it's really about, I think, finding rituals that will help you to sort of break out of that conditioning, recognize that it was there, recognize that it took its toll on you, but also confirm that you're not going to allow it to keep writing the story in the future. For me, a name change was a really big one. For some people, it's going to be a course of therapy. Some people are going to do psycho-spiritual things, you know, really getting into deep ritual. You can even just do things that you never thought you'd be able to do, that you feel that the family dynamic might have held you back from a little bit. Like, go and do those acting classes, you know, go and travel around Asia, you know, start dressing the way you fucking want to instead of the way your family told you that you should. Start exploring a religion that your family, you know, told you was evil and not okay, but you've always wanted to explore it, you've always wanted to look into it. This is the time of freedom. That's one of the things that you can do to ritualistically represent the goodness and the positivity in moving away from your family. When it comes to therapy, when it comes to having counselling that is centred around disconnecting from family, healing from that, etc. I think that can be really helpful if you find, you know, the right person that you feel you can rub along with and you can open up to. But one piece of advice that I would definitely give to you is that you need to be clear when you step into the therapeutic situation about what your aims are for the therapy. So if you know that you absolutely do not want to reconcile and that is not on the table, make sure that you let the therapist or the counsellor or the guide know that before you begin the work. Because you don't want to give somebody the impression that what you're trying to work towards is reconciliation. And you want to be very clear about where you are with that, because there are definitely some people that have the preconceived idea that reconciliation is always the right answer or it's always what you're aiming for. And if you know you're not aiming for that, you've got to be clear, and you've got to make sure that you and the person that's taking you through the work are on the same page about that from the beginning. If you don't know whether or not you're actually open to reconciliation, fine, leave it open, and that conversation will come up and you can explore how you feel as you lean into that dialogue. But I think if you know that it's in the ground, you do not want the relationship anymore, at least at this point in your life, that's very firmly how you feel. Just make sure the therapist has a sense of that before you begin the work, so that you are on the same page, and so that the therapist can help you from a place of actually having closed the relationship down and healing from that and closing that wound, rather than risking a therapist or counsellor actually reopening the wound by kind of trying to convince you to reconcile. And just as I said earlier in the video about expecting your friends and your loved ones to respect your decision and see where you're coming from, you also need to expect the same professionally. So if you feel like a counsellor or a therapist is like not hearing you and trying to convince you to reconcile, then you absolutely can say to them, look, I appreciate that I should be challenged in the therapeutic setting, but what you're trying to do is convince me down a pathway that I know in my heart is not right for me. And I did state that at the beginning of our work. I don't want to frighten anybody away from getting therapy. I'm not saying that it's a foregone conclusion that your therapist is going to be pushy about this. I'm just saying it's good to know you're both on the same page before you begin. Okay, so now I'm going to take you back to the park where I will wrap the video up, but editing me just needed to make sure I put these tips in as well. I hope that these thoughts and these pieces of advice have been useful. So much love until next time, darlings. Blessed be. And don't forget that if you want to grab a spiritual counselling session with me, if you want to talk to me one-to-one about this or about anything else, I'm always available. My online store is open. Go down below into the description bar and grab the link and go over and see what kinds of offerings and goodies I've got. See you next time.